Hello, welcome to the channel and thanks for watching. And in this video you're going to see a rather unexpected mini diorama using the Invictor tactical warsuit. So why unexpected? Well, I got to this part of the build and realised that actually they're telling you not to glue together certain parts of the cab. You can leave the bottom plate of the cab articulated and also the top kind of framework that goes open later. And that felt like just an opportunity too good to really miss. And you can see Games Workshop are almost challenging you to kind of go on, build it open. I had already showed the models for this marine project on my Instagram. It doesn't include some of the models I'm actually going to use for this diorama because I had to run out and pick them up and buy them. So an opportunity came, so why not take it? Now, building this model is a really nice kit. Actually goes together really well, and it's quite poignant building this because as I was building this model, Games Workshop had announced the retirement of the plastic dreadnought, a model that got really fond memories because I was working for Games Workshop and that got launched, and it was an incredible kit. Definitely been superseded though by the modern iteration of the kind of dreadnoughts, although I am going to try and get my hands on a plastic dreadnought before they completely disappear from the world, because it'd be nice to have one in the collection because I don't have one at the moment. Now, in terms of the build of this model, fairly standard build. I went for Rule of Cool, flamer because my aggressors for this army have got flamers, and just the heavy bolter in the holster at the side so it can look like it's doing quick draw. So here the conversion actually starts, cutting down the two control levers that go inside the cab that normally the pilot's arms are moulded into. So I'm using a pair of clippers. This is sped up, this footage, so I'm being a lot more careful than shown here, but I wanted to show you the whole cut down process. You can see how many little efforts it takes. Using the clippers to take away the big parts until you get down to sort of here, the fingers and the small areas that you need to remove that control panel. Using a brand new blade on a very sharp hobby knife, taking very small pieces of plastic off until it's cut down to the level of it now looks like the controller would look without the Marine's hands attached to them. So take your time, work through. Look, if you do make a mistake and manage to slice the whole controller off the stick, it's not a big issue. You could just use a piece of sprue there or something, but it does look a little bit better keeping the original controller on there. Now the right hand side controller in the same way, you've got to sacrifice that arm, slice that right off, and then get to work on the fingers and the backs of the hands. Again, go very, very carefully. This right hand side controller is just a normal joystick. There's nothing interesting like coming from the top. So if you do manage to slice this off, a little piece of sprue put back on should just look as authentic. So there's the two controllers in the middle of the cab. That's the first real part of this basic conversion. There's no turning back now because we won't be able to put that pilot in because we've now sacrificed both arms. Now I'm not going to take you through every last part of the basing and things that I do on this model because I've done videos for that before about how I do river bases for these Marines, but I'll just try to show you a little bit of this detail. So I'm using milliput, which is like a two-part epoxy resin that you have to mix together. Obviously, again, this footage is super sped up. It'd be great if it worked that fast. And really I'm forming a little river bank that later on we're going to put some resin in to make a flowing river. In this case, I'm just using a bit of slate from the garden, and that's the thing with hobbying. There's lots of things you can use apart from official equipment, and I just find this is a real good way of doing these bases. Now, I've built the base up because we need a sort of raised area for the river. If you didn't want to do like a river area and you just wanted it to be like a flat, arid plain, you wouldn't need to put this milliput on. And later on in this army, when I'm doing other elements to add to it, if I'm not going to put the river on, I wouldn't do that. Now, I've literally sealed the walker into that milliput. So it's stuck in place now. Now I had to go out and buy a box of Phobos Armoured Marines because obviously I hadn't intended to have a pilot out, and the pilots in the Invictor warsuits wear the Phobos armour. So I've just built up one of the models that looked like it would fit in with what I was going for. Had a control panel on his kind of arm, but I do then have to remove the accessories that he's got that don't fit in with being a pilot. So I've sliced off that bolt gun that was hanging on his arm and just taken some details off. So we're trying to pare it down so it looks like he's just climbed out of his cab and he's using that kind of sensor arrangement on his arm to, scan around. Now I've taken off the pin that holds on your backpack because the backpacks don't, they don't wear them in the warsuit. Use the head from the warsuit model, and it's time to move on to the next piece. You'll notice on the base of the model now on the milliput, I've not put the sand and things on yet, but I've put some gravel and things in as the base is progressing. I've painted around where the feet of the model will go, so when I come to the sand point, I'm not going to cover up the area where I want him to stand later on. Now what I'm putting on the armour panels here is liquid green stuff. This is something Games Workshop sell. It literally is that green stuff that you can model with, but in a liquid form, and I'm just stippling it all over the model, all the armour panels, and on the armour panels of the Marine, and that will give some texture and detail that isn't there on the normal model because I want them to look a bit grim, dark and rough. Now I'm sculpting on an animal pelt and a fur over the shoulders and back of the pilot. I've also, if you look, put a symbol on his left shoulder. It's an imperial fist symbol, and that was cast up from green stuff as well. So I won't take you through how to sculpt fur in this one. I'll link some videos down below and you can check those out, because there are a few different techniques I'm using in this diorama that I use across my whole marine army that really would take too much to explain in one little vid, but just doing that kind of sculpting here. Now, for the kind of seatbelts that the pilot wears, obviously he's stepped out, he's taken these seatbelts off. I've just sculpted a very small strip of green stuff, and this is really what I use for when I do barrel wraps and those kind of things. It's quite a simple technique, but again, check that out down below. I'm linking a few different ones here. I've put a tiny blob of super glue at the top where that sort of seatbelt comes out from, connected it to the top just using a pair of tweezers, and the tweezers have been covered in Vaseline so that hopefully things won't stick as much to them. Now on this side, I did make a slight mistake. So on the right hand side, as the pilot would see it, seatbelt, I put a bit of extra super glue at the bottom to hold it in. Some of that glue dropped onto the back of the seat, you can see here, and then the next strap I put on stuck to it. Now I could have scraped that off, which I did start to try and lift it. Did damage that green stuff a little bit, but decided, you know what, that's a bit of fate. Let's leave it where it is. Needed to tidy it up a little because you can see where the tweezers have kind of pinched that green stuff and made a bit of a mess of it. But I got a sculpting tool again, a little bit of Vaseline onto it so it's not going to stick, and tidied it back up so it looks like it's meant to be there. And sometimes when you're doing these dioramas, you'll make mistakes like that, and you can either choose to tidy it up or you can work with that mistake and really move it into your model. So you can see here, then that's on. I've put the symbols onto the panels of that model, and it's really painting time now. I'm not going to take you through the whole painting process, other than to say the areas that I've made these green stuff straps and stuff here, you treat it exactly the same as you do with the rest of the model. Once this is set, it's exactly like a normal model. Yes, they can be a little flexible if you do them really thin, but generally they're absolutely fine. Remember, this is the stuff that originally all model companies would sculpt their models out of before they cast them up in metal and things, so it's a really good material to play with. And once it's on the model, treat it exactly like any other part of the model really, unless you've got a really kind of thin area. So we're getting there, just doing some black edging on the base before we actually do the little resin pour that I'll still show you. So on the base, there's nothing too complicated. I've painted it up like I've done the rest of the model. I've just put a couple of different types of tufts, some little bits of leaves that are on there, some model leaves, and just some flocking and things like that. So nothing too fancy, and you can check that out in that other video. And really we're kind of finished, and really happy with kind of how the diorama worked and how it moved on, but I wanted to do the river base that I've done on some of the smaller models. So all I'm doing here is preparing kind of the edging. So I've folded some masking tape in half, and I'm taking a little length of masking tape, sticking the half part at the top here, so that that'll be an area where there's no kind of sticky substance. I'll stick that around the base of the model, and that's going to form almost like a dam to stop the resin that we're going to use from flowing off the base. Now, masking tape or this kind of stuff here is not particularly the strongest stuff, and I wouldn't be using this for full-on resin that you mix yourself and heats up, etc. I'll be using something a bit more sturdy, but we're going to use some Green Stuff World UV resin, and that's kind of fast cure and doesn't escape quite as easy. So all we're doing here is squeezing that into the entire area of that kind of river that we're wanting to use. So it's a bit of fun doing this little bit of diorama. Wasn't something I intended, would have been a lot easier for me just to kind of have the warsuit stood in the middle of a normal base, but sometimes those opportunities are worth taking and doing a bit of fun. This is not a Golden Demon Championship class diorama, but it is a bit of fun and will be a bit of a centerpiece for the army that people will look at. You saw there me using some little UV pens to dry this resin, and really after a minute of use, it's about time to dig these out, and we can then work on the next stages. So you can see here, tried really nice and clear and vibrant. One thing to note, I did varnish the model before doing the UV resin pour. Looks really nice, just painted the very edge of that resin black, and I think the finished effect really nice if you can get past the slightly weird colour scheme that I use. So yeah, a bit of fun really. Will be a bit of a centrepiece of the army. Definitely took a bit more work than I could have done, but I enjoyed it. And if you enjoyed it too, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you on another video. Thank you.